talking about Paul McCartney has been fascinating, but I'm glad that after this round we just get to let it be. Okay? I promise I'm not going to be making song references the entire time because I don't listen to the Beatles with my spare time consistently. In my playlist, I will say the Beatles are pretty far down at the bottom, but I will note they are actually in there. Very interesting to note because the government team would have you believe that the Beatles and the legacy that John McCartney and the man that he was is dead. And that his influence and his genre and his style of rock is dead. I called John McCartney. Oops, that's awkward. Help, I need somebody. Sorry, I apologize, I'll stop. I don't mind taking one or two POIs from you guys in this speech. I actually don't mind, but if I do take them, they'll be song references, so you better get used to it and be on your game. Okay, we've got three things I want to talk about in this speech. We're going to be talking about the philosophy that the government team has espoused, and then bringing it all back to the burdens that we propose. Because we think at the end of the day that Sir Paul McCartney is definitely not dead. That the influence and legacy that he left behind is not dead and still lives on in bands like One Direction, regardless of how much you dislike them or anything like that. I don't know why you would dislike them, but anyway, okay, you might dislike them. Linkin Park, Fall Out Boy, a personal favorite of mine. Different things like that. Chase, talk dirty to me.
So basically what you're saying is that Maxwell Silverhammer did not come down on his head.
Say it again.
That Maxwell Silverhammer did not come down on his head.
I don't understand the reference.
It's
I
a
apologize.
Beatles song.
Okay. I'm glad you know that. You know more about the Beatles than I do. So, three things I want to talk about. First off, this is the philosophy the government team has been espousing. That because something is not trending, that it's dead. Okay? That's what the government team would have you believe. That because something isn't pop, or because it's not the song Shower by Becky G, which contrary to what Spencer would have you believe, is not at the top of the charts. It's actually number 12 in the United States. Okay, anyway, okay. Because it's not that it's not alive, and that it's dead, or something like that. We think that's ridiculous. First off, just think about that statement. Everything but the genre of pop is dead. First off, we would contend that music only dies when the evolution of the origin of that style, such as we saw with classical music, fades away and stops. That's a clear, bright line that you can draw. Thaddeus, what do you want from me?
You're making us kind of twist and shout over here because we argue that the classic rock they created has been built upon and evolved by Linkin Park and Fall Out Boy, who are not like them. Therefore, it has died. It's evolved.
Oh, they're entirely like them, and they're entirely influenced by what John McCartney did. Okay, we think that's ridiculous to say that they aren't. Second thing you need to understand on this point is that music tastes change, but that doesn't mean that the music itself has died. Okay, I point you back to Screamo, which thank you, Claire Downing, for pointing out that Paul McCartney created Screamo when his producer wrote it in a pitch too high for him to get. Okay, something important to remember, that the influences of Paul McCartney and the music of the Beatles lives on today and lives on with bands such as One Direction, Linkin Park, Fall Out Boy, what have you. Pretty much name a band and we can draw it back. Okay, second big point I want to talk about is that if something is dead, it can never come back. Okay? If something is truly dead, it can never come back. Let's talk about this. So Spencer, in his speech, consistently referenced the fact that it's dead, but it can come back at some point in the future. I think they misunderstand what the word dead means. Okay? Dead means you're dead. You're not coming back, unless you're Jesus. And no one's saying that in this round, okay? If something's dead, it cannot come back. We can look at the historical definition of the word dead, but I think it's pretty common sense. We'll appeal to that standard. Now, when something's dead, it can't come back. Sit down, please. Yeah, anyway. Death means death, meaning it's gone and that it's absent. If they say that it can come back, or that it will come back at some point in the future, then it isn't dead. And they haven't met the burden as the government team. If they can say that Paul McCartney's style of music and the Beatles' style of music can come back at some point in the future, which they have said throughout this round, then they fail to understand what it means and what they have to prove to show that Paul McCartney has died. They failed to do that. You should vote them down because of it. Third thing I want to talk about is that they have to be able to point to a cause and a time of death. Okay, something that they haven't done throughout this round, something that's extremely, extremely important. When the evolution of that music ends. Ty talked about when you can make the argument that the classical era ended, in the Baroque period, for instance. Several scholars will make that argument. Something that the government team can't point out to you. They can't say, oh, at this point, the evolution of the style of music that Paul McCartney created, or that the Beatles created, that's when it stopped evolving. That's when it died. I fail to see how they would be able to show you that somewhere in between Paul McCartney and Fall Out Boy, there was something that just died in Paul McCartney's style and origin of music that didn't jump over to Fall Out Boy, or didn't jump over to One Direction, or didn't jump over to Linkin Park. They're all extremely, extremely, extremely influenced by Paul McCartney and the music he created. I've got 15 seconds, so you're definitely in protected time. Sit down, sir. Okay, I want to wrap this up. Couple things we need to talk about. First off, you need to understand the burden that they have to meet. They have to show that he's never coming back. pretty crucial part of being dead is that you don't come back. They have to show that he's completely gone, both physically and his legacy, and finally they have to be able to point to a cause and a time of death, something that the government team hasn't been able to do from the very beginning.